We are live, everybody, on the Gamification Revolution. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Gabe Zickerman. I'm coming to you from lovely Chicago, Illinois today, where it is absolutely freezing cold, but very sunny, as you can see behind me in the offices of the wonderful Centra, where we're holding our G Summit Global workshops. I'm traveling around the world, talking to folks all over the place, doing hands-on workshops and meetups. We're having a great time here in Chicago with the group. If you're interested in joining us for G Summit Global, online or offline, in person or on the internet, get access to new talks, really exciting, cool stuff, join me for a hands-on workshop, get certified, blah, blah, blah. gsummit.com, you can find out all about it, and I hope to see you soon before the tour ends right around the end of the year. But as always, it is the Gamification Revolution, and we're here to talk about exciting topics and engagement. And my guest today is the lovely and talented Aaron Price. Hi, Aaron.
Hello, Gabe. Thanks for having me.
Yay. Aaron is actually in the Gamification Co. offices right now, so some of you might be familiar in New York City. And for those of you that are joining us for the first time, welcome to the Gamification Revolution. You'll need to click a button to log in, use your social passwords to log in, and then you can actually chat. You see this great chat going on the side. You can also ask Aaron or I questions. All you have to do is click on the question button or the camera button, and you can ask us a question in real time, and we'll get to it, and we'll answer them while we're together on the video today. If you're watching us as a podcast or video podcast, you can't ask questions, but you can follow me on Twitter at gzikern. And for regular guests, welcome back. Okay, so Aaron, so just so that everybody knows, Aaron and I co-founded a company called LiveCube, which some of you who've been to G Summit will know. Why don't you tell everybody what LiveCube is and why it's so important?
Yeah, besides being the most amazing thing ever, LiveCube is about focusing social media behavior at events. And so for those of you who attended the Gamification Summit, and have been to events in general, you may recognize that it's difficult to engage with speaker handles or to find speaker handles, to find the right hashtag and spell them correctly. So we built LiveCube to focus people's social media use and activity, but also give them incentives to be involved in the conversation so that they could earn badges and prizes and real rewards from event organizers for being influential and adding quality content to events.
So this is such an interesting thing, right? Because when we started doing LiveCube and doing all this stuff, it really was born out of a frustration about the live event setting and engagement in a live event setting. You know, you've run events, Aaron, you like really successful events, like started the New Jersey Tech Meetup and all that. How do you feel about the issue of attendees in a session, in a conference session, with their heads down in their laptops, in their iPads the whole time? Isn't there some kind of conflict between what we're trying to achieve and doing something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first I've changed my tune on this. I used to want people focused 100% of the time just on what's going on. And the reality is that's not what people do just with normal human behavior. When you're at an event, if you think about being at an event like in a classroom, as you're learning things and as you're inspired, you're writing them down. And before there were all the smartphones and the technology, you were writing them in a notepad. You were writing them on the back of an envelope. You were still taking notes. Now we do it in a way that lets you amplify your notes. And so when people are using LiveCube and their heads are down, I'm psyched because I know that they're inspired and they're thinking about interesting content and sharing it in a way that's not distracting to the event. Versus if their heads are down and they're texting their girlfriend, it's that's a bummer. That's in my opinion. When I'm hosting an event as an event organizer, that's when I'm failing. So I think it's when their heads are down and they're engaged, it's great.
Well, you don't think that, do you think we can't fight that though? I mean, isn't your natural instinct to, like you said, your natural instinct was to push back on that and prevent it from happening? I feel like there's some tension there around that people actually want to fight against that head down social media thing.
They do. And my instinct was to do so, right? And everybody's walking around with one of these. Well, not so many with these because I'm one of the Android guys, and a lot of people yell at me for that. But with some smartphone, and the reality is, people have a lot of other things competing for their attention. The digital revolution has caused the world to get a little bit noisier, and so I'm embracing that noise and saying, okay, I can't change the reality that someone has in their pocket the ability to play a game or text a friend or check out pictures of people that they're curious and being voyeuristic and watching. So if I'm going to compete, if I'm going to put on a great event, I'm going to spend a lot of money and time and resources and bring in great speakers and try to host a really engaging event, I better have a tool that gives them something to do during that event. Because if I don't, even if I pretend it's not true, they're going to be on their mind may be elsewhere. So, LiveCube came out of the reality that you're competing for their people's attention, and if we can introduce something at an event that's really effective at drawing in people's attention, it could be a home run. It could really amplify not just their voice, but the ideas and the inspiration that comes out of a lot of kinds of events that we try to power.
So, what do you actually, what's the actual goal of gamifying an event? So the one thing you talked about sort of focusing, right? But what other things can gamifying a live event actually accomplish?
So what's unique or a potential challenge in a live event is that because there's a lot going on, we have to be able to provide value through whatever means, in this case we're talking about social media, very rapidly. And so with using LiveCube, we have to give someone value in 3 seconds. You have to be able to open a session. So if you think about the current state is if you're at an event that is using technology and using a hashtag, you can open your Twitter app, you can pull up a hashtag, and you can start sorting. You can start doing let's see what's going on here. And now I've lost you, right? Because now you're seeing not just the random stream of activity, you're also of the event. You're also seeing maybe Miley Cyrus is doing something crazy and smoking weed somewhere today. It's showed up in your feed. Other activities going on.
So this is okay. So this is
right?
this is a funny point though that you're making now, right? Because there's all this talk about second screen and third screen. TV networks have tried to do that for some time, right? And to a great extent, it feels to me like one of the problems is that there's no purpose to those second or third screen apps. What do you think about the need for there to be some purpose?
That's the whole point, right? Like that's what we're competing against. If we can make the activity, and you get me fired up, so I'm moving stuff around, hitting mics here. But if we can get people engaged with the tool that they're using, we can win over their attention. And the previous questions about ultimately what's the goal is, so that somebody else in that event can pull up this screen, whether in this case it's a web app, and in 3 seconds or less get value. And that means seeing the best ideas of what's going on in the room and seeing the most interesting people who are talking about the event. And so they're instantly talking about, they're making connections, whether it's an educational connection because they're inspired, or a real human connection because they're saying, oh, this girl's talking about the same thing I'm talking about. Sorry, my screen went dark for a second, I went to sleep. Okay. The ability to connect with somebody in the room. So it's about building those connections in a real way so that an event doesn't have to be a passive experience for everyone except the guy on stage. It can be an active experience, and we can use this tool to make that happen.
So that's so interesting, right? Because I feel like with LiveCube, we've actually been able to do something that those second and third screen apps have never really been able to do. So it's had a couple of successes. Do you want to talk about a couple of those? And then I think everyone,
I would love
and I think everyone wants to dig in. We want to talk a little bit more about how we're doing that. What's the method to the madness?
Yeah. So the first notable big success is the Gamification Summit, which is, I think, just a fantastic example. The best highlight there is that the event itself became globally trending on all of Twitter. So I think that's a really, for people who understand what drives those trends on Twitter, that's a huge win. But since then, we've had some other really, really great wins with some good stats I could share, like an event where we had 183 people at a corporate event where social media adoption has challenges. And we saw over 6,000 unique messages posted and over 13,000 reposted messages. And beyond that, people coming up to us at the event saying, this is so cool, look where I am in the leaderboard. And I've met some people who are from around the country who I didn't know from my company. This is a pretty large Fortune 100 company. And I've met some people who turns out I've been competing with in the app, but now we've made a real connection. So having success like that. We did an event last week. We had 80 people use the app, many of whom were using Twitter for the very first time. This is women who are not typically in the social media demographic that are active. coming up to me, showing me how they're using Twitter for the first time. They're on the leaderboard. They're super excited about it, and their kids and their grandkids are going to be so impressed that they were not only using social media but competing with social media. So it clearly brought out some great engagement.
So there, you're just talking about competition. How important is like this sort of competitive drive in this setting? Because normally we don't really think of the audience of a live event being engaged competitively.
So I think there's a really important thing to point out, which is while it's a competition, it's a very friendly competition. Everyone is
How
there.
is it a
There's
competition
a
at
sort
all?
of a cool. Oh, how is the competition at all? So as people engage with the app and post messages, they're earning points and badges for contributing content. And it's done in a clever way so that the most retweeted and talked about content filters to the top. And if people are getting kind of spammy, which hasn't happened yet, but if it does, we push those comments to the bottom so they're not distracted. So as people check into sessions, post messages, post photos, are retweeted, make connections, they're earning points. And those points drive leaderboards that have some incentives behind them. So in some cases, people are earning real physical rewards. In some cases, they're earning social and virtual rewards, but there are a variety of mechanisms to help people be incentivized for finding quality content.
Okay.
So on the latter point, go ahead.
So
Yeah.
so talk about the design.
So So then what happens is, and at the event I was talking about last week, they used our projected view. So it shows the leaderboard of who is active and who is leading. Excuse me. And so that drives some interesting human behavior in the event because people now see that instead of tweeting and using a hashtag where it gets lost to the Twitter sphere, it's now having an impact in real time in their event, and they're seeing live metrics move on screen. And in some cases, excuse me, their photo showing up in a leaderboard. And what we've seen happen there is it's become a conversation starter. Who's this girl, Jen, who's on the leaderboard, who's so active? Why can't I displace her? But in a very friendly way, in a very collaborative way, where people then want to say, people recognize they're part of a bigger conversation and want to contribute to it. You want to make friends with the other people, and afterwards they're sharing stories. And in some cases, we have prizes they can unlock with secret behavior, and they're sharing tips on, did you try doing this? And this is pretty cool. Did you hear that speaker say that thing? That was one of the most retweeted comments that I had throughout the day. He was so inspirational.
So that's very interesting. In fact, folks are talking about the meaningfulness of meeting new people in live events, which is something that I think is often sort of overlooked, but that friendliness, that community, the conviviality of all that. I just want to jump for a second to a comment that Michael Finney, one of our regular guests here on the show, mentioned just a few minutes ago, which is about augmented reality and Google Glass. And I'm curious to know, Aaron, if you have an opinion about how those things together with gamification might affect a live event in the future. I know it's like a weird blue sky thing to think about, but how do you think
No,
it will transform events?
I thought a lot about this lately because I was invited to a Google Glass event, and so I got a chance to try on to use them, and it's very applicable to what we're doing because the argument is whether it's a distraction or enhancement. So I think that again, like my feeling about where we are in the place in the digital evolution is noisy behavior. And I think using game mechanics in a smart way, like we've shown with live cubing, like lots of people are showing with lots of applications, can help filter through the noise. Because what I see is what needs to happen with things like Google Glass and with even your phone, you need relevant information very quickly. It's not distracting. So I think that I could see a use case with Google Glass and LiveCube, just using our own tool as an example, where people are seeing relevant information about something that's not distracting. As I talk to people about using LiveCube, one of our guiding principles is being complementary to an event. I think Google Glass should be complementary to life, not distracting to life. That's a huge issue. If it's a distraction, I think it disrupts day-to-day living. If it's complementary, and you can use game mechanics to drive interesting complementary behaviors that drive interesting interactions, it could be a home run. I think we could use it in events, and we could use it day-to-day.
That I think is kind of the interesting point to me, and one of the reasons why we built it, in my mind, is that a lot of this stuff, like all these tools and stuff are available. Like for example, Twitter for an event attendee, right? You can be at a concert taking Instagram photos or at a live, like a workshop, tweeting online. But without some sort of structure, without something to do, without a set of challenges and a goal to achieve, and some rubric to pass through, and potentially, some rewards, potentially some kind of conflict or competition, whether it's friendly or not, those tools are really sort of like a sideshow to the actual thing rather than accretive to them. One of the things that we did at G Summit, right, like that was very popular to do with LiveCube, MemeCube, one of the most popular rewards was this secret session with me. So if you were one of the top people on LiveCube, after day one, on day two, you got a secret message via the platform that said, hey, come here at 2:45 and do this meeting. And we do this like, intimate roundtable with a small group of people at the secret session. And Ivan's, of course, asking what happens at the secret session. And Ivan, the first rule of Fight Club is we don't talk about Fight Club. But yeah, so the secret session was a very sort of popular reward and something really exciting. So do you think, from your perspective as an event organizer, I know that people have responded very positively to that idea of things like secret sessions. Do you think event organizers need to have stuff like that, and do they need to start layering those things onto their experience in an actual event?
So, in principle, yes. I think that for event organizers who think of themselves as being on the cutting edge of engagement, those kinds of things are absolute home runs. It's like opening the Cracker Jacks box and finding the best prize ever uh, inside. There's that maybe that wasn't advertised on the outside of the box. Without having when if their events are we've both been to events where they bring in amazing talent and sometimes well-paid musicians to try to keep people fired up, and it's a challenging thing to do. And so the more tools that you can do that are engaging to get people unlocking ideas and prizes and things that they may not have had access to
Yeah.
otherwise. It's sort of like the I forget exactly the airline uses your example, but it's sort of like having the red carpet laid out next to someone saying, actually, you can be special because you participated and we can reward you. Having events without a feedback loop of some kind is a very passive one-way experience. Giving people something to do that's interactive and has a feedback loop and reward mechanism, it's natural human behavior to people to gravitate towards wanting to get, to be heard and acknowledged for participating in the event.
Sure.
And it works well.
Um,
It's like if you were on a soccer team playing against all these teams all year long, and there were no trophies and prizes and captains and rewards and possible press articles. It was a one-way street. There's no feedback loop. And so by giving people recognition for being involved and active and doing well, um, it drives more and better
Yeah,
behavior.
well, so Ivan asked this very reasonable question, which is, so what is a special reward at a large event? Many conference organizers, I think they kind of tread the same stuff over and over again. They give out, crappy bags, or like, here's a, snow globe, or the one that I keep getting right now has to do with charging or battery backup or something for a device, which seems to be very popular.
Right.
And all event organizers like
Right.
kind of go down the same path at the same time with the same tchotchkes and giveaways. Is that kind of stuff? How do we move past that stuff?
So you did one that I thought that I think was a wise decision, which was giving away some of your time, right? Giving away knowledge. And I think that first it should be noted that it's very these rewards vary a lot based on the kind of event and the kind of audience and the goals of the event. For something corporate, a lot of times access to people's time is something that's highly sought after. At a corporate event, frequently, middle management doesn't have a lot of time with the executive team. And so at one of our events, the prize was lunch with the executive team, and that was wildly popular. It didn't cost the company much besides some time, but it touched on a lot of the mechanisms that made it a smart game mechanic because it publicly awarded someone with access to people who have a lot of clout, and then they were heard. So there was feedback immediately in the session that they won something, and then there was more feedback in that they had a chance to be heard by their senior management. So I think that's a smart thing for people to do when it makes sense. Um, if it's something that's more general consumer driven, it could be an autograph thing from whoever the celebrity person may be.
Right.
But they don't. A lot of people think, well, we need to give away a car. It doesn't have to be something that has an enormous economic value. It could be something that has an enormous perceived value or enormous social value. And depending on the event and the time and the audience that's there, something that may seem like a small move that's not a tote bag or a solar charger for all the hiking you do in the woods and making your phone calls can go a really long way in making people feel appreciated.
Well, in fact, Beth is mentioning in the chat. She says, she doesn't think the prize has to be huge. Recognition works. And Michael Finney talks about the SAPS model in gamification: status, access, power, and stuff as a sort of structure. Aren't we really raising the bar though for event organizers here? I mean, now it's not just enough for an event to have great speakers and be up on a stage. Now the audience really expects now the audience really expects to have a two-way communication. How is gamification really supposed to play into that? What's its role in making sure that the event's kind of feedback loop, let's say, and the recognition of attendees and so on, what's it supposed to do in this context? Because I think there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. And what happens now, just to that, an easy example of the feedback loop is a Twitter wall. And that is perceived, and sometimes the reality is that that's a dangerous thing to do. And so using game mechanics, you can crowdsource the ability for organizers to find the best content. So something, the reality is that the logistics involved here can be complicated. If the audience is very engaged and then spending a lot of time posting to social media, it then becomes a challenge for an event organizer who may want to post up the highest quality content, at least in the pre-live feed world, to quickly find the person or the most popular comments and put them on screen. Using game mechanics, we can crowdsource the ability for people to go through and find the best commentary, so they're retweeting the best stuff. And we have, in our case, a projected view that puts that stuff front and center in a moderated view, so that event organizers can now say, look at a dashboard, here's the most popular commentary, here's the most popular person right now, let's get this guy on screen to give him some reward.
Right, okay.
And so I think to Beth's point on recognition, now they're on screen and they're saying, this guy's most popular, he just won.
Right.
He's on screen, maybe he won a prize, but it's social recognition.
Well, isn't that so interesting? Because that is really a 180-degree turn from the way that most events think about the audience. The audience at most live events really isn't an expert participant in the conference. There's like this two-tiered world. You're either a speaker or an attendee. And what we're actually talking about doing to some extent, or some of what we're doing here, is actually elevating the attendees to some extent, right? Especially the ones who are making a significant contribution.
That's what gets me so excited about it, because I've run these events, which is in part how we teamed up in this project, and I do a few things kind of in an offline way to empower the audience to be part of the event. One simple thing that I think every event organizer should do is I have everybody stand up. You sit for 3 hours, and after about 45 minutes or an hour, I have everyone stand up and high five their neighbor. And that creates an interaction with the audience that's really, really valuable, and people start meeting each other. A lot of that behavior is what we try to incentivize to happen through LiveCube. And so I think that event organizers who understand innovation in the event space will realize that by using engagement tools like LiveCube and others, obviously there are other things out there, we love LiveCube, but using tools, you can empower your audience to feel like they're actively part of the event, that it's not just a stage that's well lit, and the metaphor is kind of accurate, right? Like you can't see anyone in the audience a lot of times. We're giving event organizers a way to highlight people who are adding really quality content to be part of part of the event in a meaningful way that's safe for organizers and event organizers to do so. That's not this kind of Wild West approach where it's like, we use a hashtag and I hope it works. Now we have a way to actually prove that there's value and engagement, and the crowd's chosen the best quality content.
Right. So Roman, for example, is talking, also a frequent guest here on the show, talking about how if we're really doing this well, we really would be focusing on these intrinsic rewards: status, access, and power. And Amy Baskin, also often here, and a speaker at G Summit, talks about a progression of better prizes for sustained engagement. So I guess my question for you is, two-parter. The first one is, are we finally really going to be able to move away from the tchotchke, or are people always going to want the logoed softball and the snow globe from the conference? Does that even matter? And the second question is, what do we know now? What are we capable of doing in terms of delivering that meaningfulness? Do you think event organizers are ready for that?
So I hope we can move away from the tchotchke, but my 3-year-old daughter probably hopes that we don't because she gets a lot of fun stuff that way. The I think that smart event organizers will be able to do some pretty cool things. One of those things is recognition across events. That's very challenging to do now. As more and more event organizers use some of these digital tools, you have ways to see your most engaged attendees. I think that as these kinds of tools evolve and event organizers implement them more and more, we can get away from, the carrot doesn't have to be a logoed pen. The carrot could be a much more meaningful thing that costs the event organizer a whole lot less in real dollars, in that it's recognition and the feedback loop. Yes, I do think that we will start to see the reward be some of these social tools instead of the physical ones.
Do you think event organizers are ready for that? I feel like there's some.
I'm learning.
Yeah. What are you learning?
I'm learning that many are and many aren't. I can appreciate this, this point. Like every month, we run our New Jersey Tech Meetup every single month, and it's a nerve-wracking experience because you're basically putting on a show for 3 hours for 200 people. So and that's a small show. I can completely appreciate when people spend 10 times as much money on a bigger show, and they're nervous about change. And so many event organizers are absolutely ready for this and embracing it. And some are nervous about embracing this change and understand that some of them have different technical levels and are worried about what's going to happen and how it's going to go. And what if somebody curses during the thing and it shows up on screen, which obviously we prevent. But there are some legitimate questions and some barriers to getting people comfortable with this. But many realize there's a big issue that they can solve. And not only that, in solving it, will make the event experience amazingly more engaging. And those are really exciting conversations for us to have.
Let me ask you a slightly difficult design question, because I know that this is a challenge for a lot of people. So most events these days have an app, and the apps are just not well liked, and they're certainly not well used. Definitely a challenge. You can spend a ton of money at an event making an app, and everybody wants to have one, and then people really don't use the app. And I know that we've gone around a lot with LiveCube trying to work on this issue. I talk to folks a lot in my design workshops, and when we talk about user experience, how important that first 60 seconds is. Can you say anything about best practices for event organizers to think about when they're using an app, whether that's a gamified app like LiveCube or something else, for getting people to start using a new second screen or third screen tool?
So, yes, I completely agree with you that people seem to want an app, but not sure why or how or for what. And what we've seen is anywhere from 30 to 50% of people at an event won't download the app, which is why we've gone in the web app direction. We have some ideas about ways we can give people, power users, an app if we want to, but we think that the web app is the way to go. And with HTML5, you can make a very, very rich experience. You'll see that more and more games that aren't on the App Store that are generating tons of revenue are using HTML5 to do so, and you can read more about that. And those, I mean, real games, but people are able to build very, very rich experiences with apps. On the design issue, I think that you'd probably agree it's not even 60 seconds. You have like 5 seconds. And at a live event where there are people next to you and things on screen and people trying to hand you swag, there are that many more distractions. So if you don't give someone a clear call to action right away, one thing they can do to add value or get value immediately, you're very likely to lose them. So in any design issue, I would think a lot about providing or very clearly showing what you can do and why you should do it. So the value add in the engagement. So in our case, we try to show a leaderboard or prizes to show, like, if you do this, you could show up on a leaderboard, but not overwhelming people with a million choices of things to do and a huge stream of data, right? Like, our whole premise is complementary to the event. And so in doing that, it's got to be that first 5-second experience better be, if I participate, it should be complementary to my experience, and it should be super, super easy. I think that super simple model should drive every behavior.
So super easy and very clear at the beginning, right? And probably even, wouldn't you agree, somewhat rewarding pretty fast, so there's not like a huge lag in the reward cycle?
Yeah, that's what I meant by value add, that you see that you get something out of it for participating. Because in my point on it being a noisy world, to engage people as a challenge, you better have a reason why I should participate.
Exactly. Well, great. So, Aaron, if folks want to follow you, if folks want to find out more about LiveCube, where do they go?
We done already? That was so
Yeah, the
fast.
30 minutes goes by so fast.
So to check out more about LiveCube, see livecube.co, and you can follow LiveCube app, or you can check me out at AP Startup on Twitter. I'm happy to talk to anybody about game design, LiveCube, or anything else.
Fantastic. And I, for one, I just have to say, I really look forward to a world in which that two-way communication is real and it's not just like yelling into a black hole all the time. Thank you very much, Aaron Price, for being with us today. Thanks to all of you who joined us on the Gamification Revolution today. Awesome to have you, our regular guests and all of our new guests. You can follow me at @gzakurum and find out more about everything that we're doing at gsummit.com. We'll be back next week with another guest talking about engagement and gamification around the world and on various different topics. Until then, friends, we'll see you soon. Keep having fun.